Buonasera, io sono Enrica Manenti e in realtà in questo momento tento di sostituire la dottoressa Sebastiani, che non può essere presente per motivi di lavoro e cerco di coordinare i lavori di questa seconda parte del pomeriggio che riguardano i nuovi compiti della biblioteca. Quindi voi mi scuserete, non ho avuto tempo di approfondire molto né i profili dei colleghi né l'abstract, però insomma, credo di aver capito il senso ovviamente di questa parte della sessione. Poi vi comunico che la dottoressa Federica Riva non parlerà oggi, mentre ci verrà anticipata il contributo di Massimo Gentili Tedeschi, che appunto domani non poteva essere presente per la propria relazione. Questo cambio non ci preoccupa perché in realtà stiamo parlando di cose proprio, voglio dire, molto, molto simili e tutto sommato da vedere sicuramente in parallelo. È un discorso unico, mi sembra. E i relatori conoscono i tempi che hanno e cercheremo di rispettarli, anche perché si è già visto, credo anche nella prima sessione, come è interessante parlare tra di noi. Noi siamo avvantaggiati dal fatto di essere un numero non eccessivo e credo ci sia un pubblico molto competente, di competenze e anche di esperienza, quindi è importante cogliere l'occasione anche per parlare tra di noi, credo. Io direi di cominciare subito, dico solo due parole appunto su questa sessione, i nuovi compiti della biblioteca. Quindi passiamo da un discorso ancora più ampio, in cui abbiamo cercato, tra virgolette, di collocare la biblioteca contemporanea in contesti diversi, più ampi, più macro forse anche, a qualcosa che ci riguarda un po' più da vicino. Nel senso che i relatori di questa seconda parte del pomeriggio entrano nel merito tutto sommato di questioni che possono essere questioni nuove, possono essere questioni già note, possono essere rivisitazioni di questioni che in realtà noi affrontiamo, specialmente chi ha una certa età, da parecchio tempo. È molto interessante sempre fare il punto sullo stato dell'arte, proprio anche della professione, credo che sia utile. Io direi appunto di iniziare subito. La prima relazione è del collega Richard Kessler, British Library, London, e il testo, diciamo, in inglese, sarà in inglese, il collega parlerà in inglese e ci darà informazioni, ma anche insomma una visione dagli UK riguardante in particolare ovviamente biblioteche musicali e i due pilastri della questione delle biblioteche, cioè da una parte sempre le collezioni e dall'altra le possibilità di fruizione. Quindi il titolo in inglese è Music Collection and Access in the Digital Age, a View from the UK. Grazie.
Thank you, and my thanks too to the Levi Foundation and in particular Professor Stanoncelli for the invitation to be with you today. It's a great pleasure and an honour. That is my title, and it will cover selection and acquisition and preservation and development and how to provide access to them. I was struck too by the title to the conference, which sets out the context for these whole proceedings: Music Library Economy and in the Digital Age, from specialization to public consultation services. Is that better? These few words manage to encapsulate some major issues that face the library community today. The need for economy, for example, means to work as efficiently as possible with the resources available, always aware of what other parties are doing, so as not to waste precious resources in duplication and risk creating gaps in provisions elsewhere. Successful collaboration also allows us to share our resources and expertise. And the digital age describes the momentous changes which are affecting music materials and access to them today, and could easily be the subject of the whole proceeding. And then the antithesis between the specialist and the public reminds us that what we do can be relevant to the widest possible range of musicians: university academic, amateur or professional musician, or simply any music lover. Our job is to use our expertise about the music and its catalogues and technology to provide insights and added value so that musical content can be navigated or interrogated in ways that were not possible before. In that way, we will not only enhance the experience of present users, but will reach new ones. First, perhaps, more on the issue of collaboration. I can't underestimate how important this is. It underpins so much. In the past, the great libraries of the world prided themselves on the excellence of their historic collections, and of course that is still true today. A library may still take delight when it, rather than a rival institution, succeeds in making a prestigious acquisition. Well, that sort of competitive behaviour and sentiment is entirely inappropriate in a digital environment. So many projects are enriched by working together, forming partnerships, sharing expertise and resources, and it is the responsibility of those libraries at the top to take the lead. These partnerships should bridge all sectors, because music materials are held by a wide range of libraries: academic, conservatory, public, national, so as to reach the widest range of musicians. An activity which neatly illustrates the benefit of library collaboration, as well as demonstrates the huge role that advancing technology has to play in our work, is the recent introduction of statutory legal deposit for digital publications in the UK. And by legal deposit, I mean the obligation for new publications to be supplied or made available to certain designated libraries as soon as they appear. And in the UK, those libraries are the British Library, the National Libraries of Scotland, Wales, University Libraries of Oxford and Cambridge, and the Library of Trinity College, Dublin, and you see them all there. Until now, legal deposit only applied to printed publications, but last year Parliament approved regulations which extended this scheme to the digital format. Works published in digital format alone are now subject to legal deposit, and where publications are produced in both digital and print format, then there's a choice as to which to deposit. But the default at the moment is print unless and until publisher and libraries agree otherwise. From the outset, the legal deposit libraries decided to collaborate over this. In theory, otherwise, each legal deposit library could make its own decision whether to take print or digital, and build a separate relationship with each and every publisher. But instead, the libraries formed a consortium and will make decisions together which will apply to all of the libraries. And equally, for simplicity's sake, the decision to take digital rather than print will relate to all of the output of a given publisher and not be selective. Now, there's a lot of room for discussion already here, because we are finding that the academic legal deposit libraries such as Oxford and Cambridge are less keen to transfer to digital than we in the British Library. But the benefits nonetheless of collaboration will be huge. It's no understatement that the emergence of digital publishing is at least as momentous a change as the emergence of printing in the 15th century. There are so many technical issues. Paper is trusted. We know how long it lasts and how to preserve it when it wears. But hard disks fail all the time. Yet, we are beginning to entrust tomorrow's heritage material to a medium that is not yet stable. And all of the associated technical issues, ingest, file formats, metadata, standards, preservation, access, copyright, in short, the whole workflow, take us into uncharted waters. So, the benefits of forming a consortium are that all costs, expertise, resources, and risks can be shared. We therefore also speak with one voice to the publishing community, and instead of taking 6 copies of any digital publication as we are entitled, we just take one, and provide access to it from all the legal deposit libraries. Now, these statutory regulations passed last year were 10 years in the drafting. That was because of the radical nature of what was being proposed, the complexity of the technical issues, and because they were produced by a process which was truly cross-sectoral. Libraries, publishers, authors, and users all contributed to the consultation process. And Parliament evidently judged that self-regulation like this, by the parties concerned, rather than by imposing legislation, was the best way to deal with the extension of legal deposit into the digital age, on account of how sensitive and possibly contentious the issues were perceived. Parliament was right, but it took 10 years. At the moment, attention is focused on digital books and journals, but we musicians are watching developments closely because we want to extend them at the first opportunity to digital sheet music. We are therefore already having initial talks with the music publishers. At present, 2 schemes are being envisaged for digital books and journals. One is a portal whereby publishers may register their details and, once approved, upload their publications. These are stored temporarily while their content and associated metadata are checked and validated before passing through to our digital library. In due course, the metadata is imported into our catalogue and a link provided to the digital content. The second scheme is intended to ingest digital material more easily in larger quantities. The web is regularly trawled for suitable domain names, and material identified by this process is then automatically harvested for ingest into the digital library store. The benefits are obvious. We are able to ingest large quantities of material with minimal human intervention. There are additional challenges, of course. Much of this material is stored behind firewalls, payment systems, or other protection and validation schemes. And of course, they'll all be slightly different from one publisher to the other. Nonetheless, all of this activity under the banner of legal deposit is an excellent illustration of federated collection development and access in the digital age. And we hope that what we develop here will be applicable to other spheres once we tackle all these problems. Unfortunately, sound recordings do not come under legal deposit. So we have had to explore other ways of systematically preserving the recorded commercial output of the UK. Hence, for a number of years, the British Library has had an arrangement whereby the major recording producers send us their discs on a voluntary basis. They're not obliged to do so, but they do, for free, nonetheless. But we are very much aware that the transition to digital online content applies to recorded music just as it does to print. The CD is not dead, but it's dying. Also, much original music of good quality is being produced by much smaller, independent producers or individuals with whom we have no established voluntary schemes. And as these proliferate, setting up such schemes would not be scalable. So we are developing a sound portal by analogy with the digital books portal to encourage voluntary submission of digital recordings too. This system is called Metable, after the software company that is building it for us. Recordings may be offered to us in a similar way to the books portal, but Metable has at least one major additional feature. This addresses the fact that the metadata accompanying recordings is often not of a high quality. It might have originated from a large distributor, a small independent company, or the musicians or themselves, but it won't have come from a professional cataloguing agency. Nowadays, however, there are a number of publicly available databases which may have metadata of a better standard, such as Discogs, MusicBrainz, and Decibel. And those are rings on the left. So Metable automatically searches these databases via APIs and offers the curator the option to import better quality data to match the recording. And if so, then the metadata offered is on the right. We will connect to other metadata databases in due course. And once again, the metadata and digital file join separate queues for ingest into the catalogue and the digital library store. And this whole workflow is another example, therefore, of the importance of collaboration and attempting to federate cataloguing and content across sectors. All these developments are very much in line with the British Library's overall corporate priorities and our acquisition policy, or what we call our content strategy. A major element of this is to acknowledge the inevitable transition to digital publication. Corporately, the library states the belief that perhaps as much as 75% of all scholarly literature will be published in digital-only format by 2020. Personally, I think that's overstating things and simplifying it. The shift to digital is not happening at the same speed across all disciplines. It is taking place much more quickly in the sciences than in the humanities. And the pace of change also differs from one country to the next. But the trend is certainly in that direction. More and more, outputs from publicly funded research will be required to be in open access format, either freely available or available with some minor restrictions and conditions. At the same time, user expectations are changing radically. Everyone wants access to library content not via reading rooms, but on personal devices, at home or any other location of their choice. And libraries have to adapt to these new expectations. These issues may prompt libraries to question whether they need to collect physical or digital publications at all, or whether it is sufficient instead to connect to them. That is, not to purchase and ingest, but instead to link to externally held content under license. In some ways, this would be very attractive. It takes away all the expense of developing the sorts of complex processes that I've just described. Further, perhaps we need not collect ordinary commercial material which is readily available through Spotify or iTunes. But we must be cautious. It's not really appropriate to be dependent on external sources for material which a library wishes to provide access to in perpetuity. We will be beholden to those distributors forever for their ability to preserve this content, even as its format may become obsolete. If they ever went out of business too, then access to that material might disappear completely. These are serious risks. I want to turn now to access to musical content in the digital age and new ways of navigation and study. I'll focus on some British Library projects which show how digital technology has helped reveal the potential of musical data sets, that is, both catalogues and musical content, to answer questions not asked before, or perhaps to present the answers in different ways. These projects have involved musicologists, library professionals, and computer scientists working closely together. Now, born digital material is already inherently well suited to study by automated means, because its physical properties are represented by numbers which can easily be interrogated by machines. So these projects relate in the main to digitized material, because it is with digitized material that we can speak of transformation in our approach and thinking. I'm going to talk briefly about 3 music big data projects in which the British Library is a partner. The projects are independent of each other, but together cover printed and manuscript music, recordings, electronic databases, and ephemera. The concept of big data has been with us since Franco Moretti's study of the 19th century novel, and is concerned with a distant reading of the field rather than a close reading. So in a musical context, we may be considering a whole repertory of music rather than individual pieces. These projects are very short, with modest amounts of funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council's Digital Transformations Programme. They haven't finished yet, so I can't report on all of their outcomes, but I can tell you about their goals and what they achieved so far. For example, the In Concert project links 3 databases of concert information gathered from historic programs, bills, reviews, and adverts. And the fact that these databases are all in different formats immediately presents a challenge. Their formats range from raw data derived from OCR processes to highly structured data already with sophisticated indexes and authority control. The first, for example, covering concerts in London between 1750 and 1800, is in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. The second, however, covering the 19th century, is already a relational database and is not comprehensive, but takes sample data from representative years at 20 years intervals. The third, however, is not yet automated at all. It will consist of scanned printed programs of concerts in Europe, Russia and the Americas between 1901 and 1914. But synthesis of all of this data and indexing its pertinent details will permit study of not just composer, title, performer, for example, but data performance, location, venue, genre, ticket price, organizer. And covering a wide time period and geographical area, it is hoped that this merged data will produce empirical evidence of not only how music and musicians travelled over 150 years and more, but how musical tastes developed over time in fixed locations. Looking at individual concert programs will not tell us this. It is only by considering a huge critical mass that these answers will emerge from our analysis. So, what sort of research questions might this data help us answer? Well, as cities grew in the 19th century, concert going became no longer the preserve of the aristocracy. Public transport and gas, street lighting made it possible to travel from the ever-growing suburbs into city centres. At the same time, new concert venues emerged to cater for these new audiences. So how did concert programmes reflect all this social change? Concerts would no doubt still feature the great canonical masters of Bach, Haydn, Beethoven, for example, but they'd need to cater for more popular or topical tastes too. The Victorian age was the height of the music hall, for example. And how did the European tradition translate across the Atlantic, long before radio or recordings? These are some of the questions that we hope this project will help us answer. And just to before I go to the second project, just to show you the problems of OCR scanning and the difference in the material that has got to be treated in a similar way somehow. There's a program which is in Czech with its own accents, German in Gothic type, Russian, and also adverts. So how does the machine judge whether that's significant or not? And of course, some of it is insignificant, because if you look carefully you can see adverts for Wäsche, Teppiche und Flora, which are not relevant to musicological research, one would think. But there's also a Zwölftes Abonnementkonzert there. So you can't just dismiss an advert as being irrelevant. So the second big data I want to mention is BL Music Labs, and its focus is sound. Here we have benefited in the UK from two recent changes in copyright legislation. First is to do with fair dealing, and fair dealing is a concept in UK law whereby certain activity is permitted in relation to copyright works. It is an exception to copyright. One of these exceptions is the ability to make copies of copyright works for the purpose of non-commercial research. And until recently, this did not apply to sound recordings, but now it does. And the second, which was actually suggested by the British Library and taken up by the Wellcome Foundation, is to permit data mining of copyright works for research purposes. So, BL Music Labs again involves the merging of databases, this time of around 1.5 million recordings across folk, classical and pop genres, with musicologists and computer scientists working together. And perhaps the major attraction to the computer scientists has been the classical repertory, which more than the other genres offers the opportunities to compare different performances and recordings of the same piece. In the CHARM database, for example, Research Centre for the History and Analysis of Recorded Music, there are up to 30 different recordings of individual pieces by Chopin. And presentation of this analysis in visual ways allows us now to see what before we could only hear. So here we have a waveform taken from a digital audio file, converted to a sonogram, and with the potential, we haven't done this yet, to be converted back to a human readable score, i.e. transcription. And this would be particularly useful for music whose primary source is not written, such as pop or jazz, or for music for which any written score is lost, such as film music. And already the sonic visualization technique has been used to prove cases of piracy. People might be aware of the pianist Joyce Hatto, whose recordings were marketed under her own name, whereas really they were edited highlights from other people. And that was proved by analysis of the music in these terms. It wasn't sufficient to rely on the ear alone. So the potential of these techniques to analyze the nuances of interpretation and performance is obvious. Rubato, dynamics, tempo, tone, pitch, these and other musical properties can all be represented in new scientific ways, which will greatly facilitate our understanding of how music in performance achieves its effect, and how one performance of an identical work can be quite different from another. And the third and last, that's another analysis of chord structure from BL Labs project. You can't see it very well. It analyzes the most frequent cyclic chord sequences in classical compared to jazz, and of course they're different. Classical moves around in tonic dominant relationships. Jazz is much more free. That's not a surprise. What would be much better would be to compare two classical or two jazz pianists, and then you get a really meaningful analysis. The third and my last project is, like in concert, also concerned with the transmission of repertory, musical style and taste, but of a different period. This is the Big Data History of Music project, which once again looks at material not at item level, but as a large critical mass. 7 catalogues or datasets are being merged and contain about 2 million references to musical pieces in print or manuscript. And once again, collaboration has been very profitable. PhD students at Royal Holloway undertook research on the minor composers included in the anthologies, so that professional library cataloguers could incorporate this information into the catalogue records. And this was a benefit to both parties. Students had access to rare material and learned about bibliographical issues. Library colleagues benefited from the students' expert knowledge of the music repertory. And hence, we are looking to answer questions in 2 major research areas: to consider how music travelled across international boundaries in the 16th to 18th centuries, and to study how a canonical repertory of great works by great composers developed in the 18th and 20th centuries. And there are some more detailed questions there which we hope to shed light on. So, people may be familiar with what a rhythm record originally looks like. It's fairly bald. In the footnote, there are actually 51 pieces referred to by 17 composers. So when we expand the cataloguing, fully indexed, we get references for all of those people, which allows us to build a database which will be manipulated. And then when we look at this in different ways, that's one different way. It's a network graph of the whole of rhythm B1. The blue dots are composers. The bigger the dot, the more works they had published. The yellow dots are publications. The bigger the dot, the more publications they contained. And it tries to group publications with composers. Not surprisingly, the composers of the French chanson are separate from the composers of the Italian madrigal, but bang in the middle is Lassus. So it provides visual evidence very strikingly of what we know by other means. That is too busy, of course. If you want to ask a more refined question, you get an answer which is easy to understand. Paris, Venice, Luxembourg are the major cities, and the major composers are Lassus, Arcadelt, Willett. And then slightly broader, the major cities and composers published are those. London is a little dot, yellow dot at the top. That would become big in the next century, but in this century it wasn't a big publishing source. Rhythm A2, do you remember I mentioned it merged print and manuscript? Rhythm A2 is manuscript sources. Tells you how many sources there are in that table. If you present it another way, you see who the big figures are. Not surprising, Haydn and Handel are at the top. What is surprising is a third, Palestrina. He died in 1594. So he was even more popular than Mozart at that period. Pleyel too was very prominent, but how often is he performed these days? And there are other people there that one might want to question in this way once you see it like this. And of course, on that note, I will end with Venice at the centre. Thank you.